Welcome to Thursday evening stroll around your celestial neighborhood. I'm Irene Pease, your friendly neighborhood astronomer, and super excited to be checking out Venus. Tonight is the Veneras at Venus. So buckle up. It's going to be fun. It's going to be cozy. At least that's the plan. Venus is just right in the neighborhood, so we're really not going far and fill you in on all the fun, wonderful, lovely things happening on planet Venus. So, as usual, we have visuals from Stellarium and Open Space. You're seeing Open Space in the background right now. You can download it for free at openspaceproject.com. And Stellarium, we're going to pop over to in just a moment. You can find and download that at stellarium.org. So, as usual, I like to start off just kind of checking out what's out in the night sky. Just, in case you want to go out in the night sky, have some idea what to look for this week. And yeah, so here we are in our glorious evening Brooklyn skies. Some trees, some haze, like you do. So tonight we have the moon, we have Uranus, there's Mars. It's nice. The moon's going to be getting fuller this week, so the next couple weeks not really the best for like dark sky stargazing. Trying to find the really faint fuzzies. But there's another constellation. We're almost out of winter. This is like our last week in winter. Spring like is officially starting soon. So I have one more winter constellation, and then we're going to kind of wrap things up next week with Kuiper Cat with a fabulous tour all over Orion, all the best things in Orion that I haven't bothered to tell you about. But we're still going to use Orion to find one more constellation that I don't think we have covered yet. So if you find the belt of Orion, those three stars together, and then up above them you have the shoulders, Betelgeuse and Bellatrix. And then down below you have the feet, Rigel and whatever, the other star, I call it. That's its name, the other star. So down kind of below Orion, south of Orion, in his feet, in the grass, whatever, use your imagination, there's a rabbit. And if you need a little bit of help seeing a rabbit out of that, there you go, a rabbit or a hare. So that's Lepus, not Lupus. Lupus is a wolf somewhere else in the sky, but Lepus, the hare, or I just call it a rabbit because I'm lazy. But it's kind of like these two little trapezoids. It's hard to see in the city, honestly. It's a little bit of a challenge. But if you have a slightly darker sky, it's just the bright stars below Orion's feet. So below, oh, it does have a name, right? Rigel and Safe. So some of my favorite things to see over there, of course, there's a beautiful globular cluster. And if you know how I feel about sparkly things, yeah, globular cluster M79 is down there. So that's a real gem. Again, we have like a moon coming out, and that might be a little bit tougher to see, maybe with binoculars, definitely with a telescope still, but a little bit tricky when you're getting into some of the deep sky stuff with a moon out and about. The other thing that I like to look for over there, though, is a carbon star, which I can't really get to show up in Stellarium. If you search for it, you can find images of it. It's kind of off the head of the hair. So if this is like the back of the body and this is the front of the body, that I guess his head is up here somewhere. So our Leporus is up in here. It's as I mentioned, a carbon star. So I got to go out observing last weekend, and I was inspired by a new podcast I'm listening to look for some carbon stars. So our Leporus was one of them. Carbon stars have some nice color to them. They're very red, but they're dimmer when they're more red, and they're brighter when they're less red, when they're more like an orange color. So that has to do with like a buildup of carbon in their atmosphere, and they get all glowy, but then they're faint because there's this carbon in the way blocking the light. But then when that kind of dissipates or gets blasted off, then it's like brighter, but it's also more orange and less like that really vibrant red. So a lot of people are really impressed like with Betelgeuse or Aldebaran because they look kind of reddish, but really they're more orange. Even Mars is more orange than red in our sky compared to carbon stars. If you ever want to see like some serious color in the sky, I've never actually seen them in binoculars, but definitely in a telescope. If you're looking at like points of light, those will still show up even with a moon phase. So if you're out stargazing with just your eyes this week, I suggest looking for these stars, these kind of two little trapezoidy boxes below Orion. See if you can pick out Lepus the Hare. If you have binoculars, maybe see if you can see the faint fuzzy spot, or just look at the moon because it's gorgeous. And if you have a telescope, definitely look for M79, and then also try and check out that carbon star. There's also a nice one, found a nice one in Auriga, and forgot where the other one was, but it was also fabulous. So that podcast, by the way, is it's called Actual Astronomy. It's by a couple Canadian guys. They're pretty fantastic. They crack me up. Um, but speaking of podcasts, I just want to let you know there's another podcast that if you like this, you should subscribe to, AAA Sky, AAA Sky. It's a AAA Sky with no spaces. It's about space, but there's no space in the name. So check that out. Subscribe on the podcast things. Anywho, the other thing that I should probably point out, that I can't really see right now, but I'm going to talk about where it is in the sky, is, Venus, since it's kind of the main thing we're talking about tonight. So if we rewind time, super fun, rewind the time machine on Stellarium, go back to when the sun was up and just hold our breaths as we turn off the atmosphere, we notice Venus is very close to the sun in our sky right now. So you're not going to be seeing Venus in the night sky because once the sun has set, then so has Venus. So Venus is actually on the far side of the sun, which we're going to see in a moment in that kind of 3D view in open space. So if you're wondering, like, oh, she's talking about Venus, where can I find it in the sky this week? The answer is you can't. Venus is going to be coming out in our morning sky, not even really so much in April, late April, maybe May, we'll be able to see it again. It's far away and it's kind of pokey. So I'll let you know when you can see that again in the morning sky. That'll be a morning thing for all you early birds. Righty-ho then. So let's pop back on over to open space, because that's why I do this, because I need space. And it's just, I don't know, I find it very calming. Oh yeah, the other reason that I wanted to do the hare was because it's like a reminder of like the tortoise and the hare, like a race. So the Venera missions are kind of like back in the days of the space race. Not really going to talk about so much of that context. But yeah, back in the early days. So definitely some firsts. So as I had mentioned, like this is basically the 55th anniversary of Venera 3 reaching Venus. I'm not going to say landing, talk about how that landing went in a little bit. But to start off, yeah, I think I do just want to go back in time. So we'll kind of move out and just kind of get a view of our solar system and where these planets are at the moment. So there you can see like the orbit of Earth with the moon going around it. As we move further out, we should be able to see the orbit of the other inner planets, our terrestrial neighbors. So we have Venus and Mercury between us and the sun. And as I mentioned, so now we can kind of get the bird's eye view of space. So remember I had mentioned that Venus is basically on the opposite side of the sun from us right now. So here's us over here. And if you never look directly at the sun, but if you could see past the sun, Venus would be like way over there. So pretty far away. It doesn't get as far away from us as Mars does. Obviously, Mars is much further out. So when Mars is on the far side of the sun from us, it's even further away. So Venus is a little bit closer, gets a little bit closer on this side, and doesn't quite get quite as far away. So kind of a nice target for, trying to go there as opposed to, heading out to Mars. And also you can get to Venus a little bit quicker. So people have been talking, recently about everything happening on Mars and like the Mars launch window. So I thought we'd just take a quick look at like the Venus launch window, because Venera 3 was just part of like the whole Venera the whole Venera kind of program. So there were several, but we're just going to talk about the earlier lander orbiter flybys. It goes all the way up to 16 or so. But yeah, let's start off by going back in time. So this is right now set for, well, now we're looking at now, but with our magical, whoops, um, with our, just kidding, our with our science, the science of open space, we're gonna head all the way back to 1961, 1961. So it was a while ago, and I want to go actually to, close enough. Boom, back in time, and we're gonna go back to February. So here we are in early February of 1961. Nice. Smell the love. And you can see the orientation, hopefully you can see like kind of the orbits in there of Venus and Earth. So we had a launch, mid-February was the launch of Venera, sorry, so the launch of Venera 1, and that went heading off into towards the Venus. And it does kind of the same thing that we did with Mars, right? So with Mars, we launch before we pass Mars in our orbit, and then it catches up with Mars further ahead. So if we launch this, we're not going to aim it like backwards. We're going to aim something forwards, and then as Venus is coming around, Venus is going to pass us, past the Earth in its orbit, because Venus is closer to the sun, so it's moving faster, so it's going to lap any outer planets. So we can kind of see that pull around. So if we kind of just skip through the months, there's March, April, May, move out a little bit. And so it actually got there mid-May-ish, right? So launch when it's not quite caught up to the Earth, and then as it's kind of passing between us and the sun, then the probe would be on its way there, and so it gets there in just a couple months. So like 3 months, like it's a 3-ish month trip. So pretty impressive. So that was the one of the first launch windows that they really used. Venera 1, not so successful. Basically lost contact almost right away. So, but then we have launch windows like pretty much every 2 years. So again, this is like May 61. So if we just kind of plow through the months, so there's June, July, August, September, October, November, and kind of plowing along. So you can see that it's not going to be like every single year, but now we're in, are we in July of 62? So coming up kind of late 62, there would have been another window. So that one wasn't used. It wasn't until 65 that the next Veneras were launched. So Veneras 2 and 3 were launched out in November 65. And since they were launched together, they basically arrived at Venus at about the same time. So a lot of the Veneras had like kind of greatest hits, like first steps kind of feats that they accomplished. So just going to go through kind of highlights here. And I'm by no means an expert in these, but I've just been like reading on some of these and getting kind of excited and impressed with what has happened, like even, 55 years ago. So 55 years ago this month, well, 55 years ago last month, Venera 2 was supposed to be a flyby, basically lost communications. I think even before it was able to send any data back. So we didn't actually get any data from that. It was supposed to basically cut off communications during the flyby so it could just focus all its efforts on collecting data as it went whizzing by Venus. But it never really reestablished contact. So no data from Venera 2. But number 3 was supposed to be a lander. And so that's the one that I wanted to celebrate. It wasn't entirely successful. I'm gonna call it partly successful in that it got to Venus and it's somewhere on Venus. um, Landing did not go as planned, but we're gonna say that that was the first human-made craft that reached the surface. We're using that kind of liberally here. Reached the surface of another planet. So that was on March 1st, 1965. So yeah, Venera 3, March 1st, 1965. So we've had litter, debris and whatnot, technology bits on other planets for 55 years now, which is that's kind of fun. Kind of fun to think about. Yeah. So not the most successful, but the the Soviet Union just kept at it. Um, so so the next few were atmospherics. So Venera 4 was the first to really successfully return data, which was great. So 4, 5, and 6 were all just atmospheric probes, all successful to some degree. Not as much data as they had intended to get from 4, but we learned a bit about its atmosphere, right? So it has these thick clouds, right, that our telescopes from Earth can't really probe through, right? They're too thick. So it's like, ooh, what's in there? Is it lovely? And it turns out, yes, it's nice and toasty and warm. And, speaking as, someone, who lived in Wisconsin for way too long, it's just, it's freezing cold. So I'm like, oh yeah, Venus sounds great. It's super warm and it's got like this nice thick atmosphere. They still didn't know at that point how thick. But with 5 and 6, they started to figure out about how thick that was. So 5 and 6, those entered the atmosphere in 1969. So since 1969, we've been like, okay, yeah, Venus, fabulous. It's like a nice heavy blanket, about 90 times as heavy as our atmosphere. So imagine our atmosphere, but like 90 times. So that's a nice thick blanket. So just think warm and cozy and good for plants, right? Plenty of carbon dioxide, a little bit of nitrogen there. So maybe BYO bring your own oxygen. But otherwise, I think it's sounding great. Also, really great winds, so you could fly your kite there if you want. I'd be all about that. So Venera 7, which I believe I actually have an image of, made it to the surface. Do I have a picture? Venera 7, calling Venera 7. Pretty sure that one is 7. That might be 9. I think we're going to call that 7. So, so the fun thing about Venus, because it has this fabulously thick atmosphere, it's a little bit simpler EDL than we have to deal with on Mars, right? So on Mars, there's, parachutes and jetpacks and bunches of grapes and sky cranes and all this stuff. But on Venus, you have like this nice thick atmosphere, and then you could basically just, jettison your parachute from, not too terribly high up, and then just kind of land. And you're only going like maybe 10, maybe 15 meters per second. So could be worse, like really could be worse. So I'm just gonna go ahead and turn on, see if I can focus on, we want better image of Venus. I think I want to turn off the atmosphere, lose the atmosphere, and with Venus, color the whole thing and look at some of our ground layers. Yeah, layers. Found them. Not that one. Not that one. That one. Not that one. Okay, we're gonna try. I missed my combination. All right, we'll just roll with this for now. So some of our layers on Venus. So this is from the Magellan Mosaic. where we're getting most of the features. So that was a later mission. Um, so yeah, so you land on Venus and you realize, yeah, it's several blankets. And, so 7 got there. It was the first kind of successful soft landing. So it didn't crash. It got there probably in one piece, but it probably kind of fell over. So we got a little bit of data back from that, but not a lot. 8 was a little bit more successful. So 8 came a little bit later, 72, and that was the first successful soft landing, which was great. So then you could kind of start to look around, except that it didn't actually have cameras. So it's still just like making some measurements. The wind speed, like, yes, definitely can fly a kite. Check. What's the temperature? It's pretty hot. Okay, check. What's the pressure like? I'll tell you, but I'm already crushed. So a lot. So a few after that, like 8 was, similar, pretty successful landing. But then the excitement happened when they were like, you know what, let's take some pretty pictures because, Pixar, it didn't happen. So in the mid 70s, 9 and 10 were launched with a bigger rocket. There was more to them so that they could get kind of a wider rim. So if I go back to this image of what I'm pretty sure is 7. I think the later ones, they had an even wider rim around here. So you had this rim sticking out so that would basically provide even more drag. So the later ones, like when you get to 9, 10, 11, 12, they're bigger. So bigger and more massive. So this is like the height of maybe like 1.5 people. But having this nice big rim, and then you want to put your camera down here so that you can take a picture of the surface and not just be taking a picture of like maybe, the sky and maybe someone flying their kite over there. By getting an image of the actual ground and like what it looks like, the rocks and stuff. So we got our first images, black and white, from 9. So that was pretty fabulous, and I might have that somewhere. Yep. So there's 9 and 10. So 9 and 10 came as a pair, so that was like another duo. So again, that was June of 75. We got color images. Nice. Look at those rocks. And you can see a little sky over there. So these were supposed to be like 360 panoramas, but pretty much what we got back were 180s because there was an issue, which probably any astrophotographer can relate to. Slight issue with the lens cap. So I think even some of the earlier ones, like 7 or 8, I don't know if those were supposed to take images or not, but at least one of the lens caps on 9 and 10 to get the full 360, those kind of didn't pop off. So for 13, 14, they were trying to like, improve that a little bit. And I don't know, maybe it worked too well. So 9 and 10, slightly different model, right? So you can tell 13, 14, those were some of the most successful ones. And you can see like this piece of like this chunk thing. So that's part of the bit that was holding the lens cap on, right? So that's your expelled lens cap piece. So there's a piece from panorama A, and there's the piece from panorama B. So that's 13. And then if you take a look at 14, there's the piece from panorama A, and where's the piece from panorama B? Give you a hint, that's not all of it. That might be some of it there, but that's not all of it. So 13 and 14 had this other nifty little spring-loaded arm thing that was going to like pop up and like stab the ground and like do a compression test, like see how like compressible it was and, figure out something about the Martian surface. Like, the Venetian surface. So totally different planet here. So with 13, I guess that worked okay. With 14, it landed on the lens cover. So of all things, so there's 13, all right? So there's like the cover thing that popped off, and there it just popped onto the ground. There's the little spring-loaded arm. And there's 14 right onto the lens cover. Bam. Okay, so it tested the compressibility of the lens cover instead of the Venetian surface. Better luck next time. so um so yeah. So some very successful things. So we got not just the black and white, but as you saw, 13 and 14, we also got color images. So these maps that we're kind of seeing in the background, again, those came a bit later, mostly with radar mapping. So there were a couple orbiters. So actually the last Veneras that went was that 14, just kidding, 15 and 16. Those were also fairly successful orbiters. So really the Soviet program went pretty well, like all things considered. Like for the time, they had a success rate of about 50%, just over 50%. At least those are the ones that we know about. So not too shabby, but they did land mostly in the same spot. And it's kind of weird. I was trying to figure out the scheme for finding things on Venus, because it's technically spins retrograde, so it actually spins the opposite direction that it revolves around the sun. So its north pole is technically like where everyone else's south pole is. But anyway, but I did put in little markers, because that's a fun thing you can do in open space. And they all kind of landed in the same region. I think we're over here. I could be way off. Yes, this is the region over here. So you can see the little blobby markers. So all kind of in the same region, like some of them really like along the same line of longitude even. So this kind of, the northern part, that's kind of Asteria and Beta Regio, and then kind of going down along Divana Chasma. So this chasm down along here. I guess safe enough. But yeah, kind of all over the place. The only one that was off, I think that was Venera 8. Yeah, so that's 8. That's kind of all off by itself, a little bit further to the east. But the others all kind of around the same region. So I'm not sure if that was intentional, if it just happened. But there you are. So there's 7 is somewhere on there. Not really sure where, because I mean, it may have, just melted in the atmosphere, but probably not. Probably at least some of it made it to the surface. And so my guess is it's somewhere scattered among all these others, if they were aiming for kind of similar places on Venus. So pretty impressive what we were able to do. Oh, the other fun thing that I almost forgot to mention, Venera 13, sound. We have sounds from the surface of Venus. It basically sounds windy, and then you hear the machine chirping a little bit. So just kind of another shout out to 13. So sorry, 14, but 13 here, because 13 really was like the big one. So that's the one that lasted long, just over 2 hours. It survived on the surface and sent back all this data. It managed to stab the planet instead of its own lens cap. Color pictures, the first sound. 14 also had sound, but it also stabbed its lens cap. So there you go. So that's just a bit of Venera. And I think I lost Venus because wrong hotkey here. So if we head back to Venus, speaking of heading back to Venus, there it is in all its glory. There's a potential reboot. So everyone's all about like reboot this, reboot that. So that's just the last kind of image I have in here of potential collaboration, I believe, between possibly the Soviet, or sorry, not the Soviet Union is not there anymore, but the new Russian space program and the U.S. space program, NASA, and maybe some others collaborating on Venera D. So this is actually what I used for for the thumbnail here. So this is a potential mission that would happen later this decade or early in the 2030s. Um, we've gotten pretty good at Mars these days, but so maybe it's time to take another stab, literally and figuratively, at Venus and send more extended missions there, maybe some landers, some more orbiters. Right now, we just have a JAXA mission orbiting Venus at the moment. Um, but yeah, putting some other stuff on the surface of Venus could be a fun thing to do in the near future, in all our spare time. So that's our little tour. Just a quick overview-ish of the Venera programs. Um, Pretty impressive, pretty amazing, I think, what they did. Again, a lot of firsts. The first landing on the first arrival to another atmosphere of a planet, the surface of another planet, image from the surface of another planet, and sounds from another planet. So that was all the Venera missions. Very impressive. So we'll have another mission next month. I have no idea what it is, but we'll find out when we find out. In the meantime, I hope people are excited about tuning in next week to hear Kuiper Cat tell us all about the fabulous things in Orion. Yeah, we'll take another tour then. So I'm Irene Pease, your friendly neighborhood astronomer, and you've been seeing Stellarium, which you can find at stellarium.org, and Open Space, which you can find and download for free at openspaceproject.com. Thanks so much for taking this little tour around our local celestial neighborhood with me. Clear skies, everyone. Be safe out there. Don't forget to wear your mask.